Before we begin, a quick message from our sponsors. Your support helps us keep bringing you new sleep stories for free. You won't be bothered by any ads once the story begins.
When you're a maintenance engineer in a beverage manufacturing plant, you keep production lines moving and quality on track because there's no room for slowdowns. With Grainger's vast selection of high-quality motors, sensors, belts, and hard-to-find parts, you can get what you need fast and all in one place, so nothing gets in the way of getting the job done. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Welcome to Deep Sleep Stories, where you can let the day loosen its hold and drift into a quieter place inside yourself. Tonight, you will journey to a hidden cove at sunset where a sleepy otter follows the soft movements of the tide and finds rest beneath the first stars. Settle in now, in whatever way feels most comfortable. Let your body be held by the bed beneath you. Let your shoulders soften. Let your hands unclench, little by little, as though they have been carrying small stones all day and may finally place them down beside a peaceful shore. Take a slow breath in, drawing in the coolness of evening air, and breathe out, letting the breath leave as gently as a wave sliding back over smooth sand. There is nowhere else to go. Nothing more to solve. The world can continue turning quietly without asking anything of you. Imagine the last light of the sun resting low over the water. The sky is brushed with lavender, peach, and the faintest gold, as though the day has painted itself softly before closing its eyes. Faraway gulls call once or twice, their voices fading into the wide hush of evening. The sea moves in long, unhurried breaths, folding and unfolding at the edge of a small, sheltered cove. The rocks around the cove are rounded and dark from the tide, warmed all day by sunlight and now cooling beneath the evening air. Between them grow tufts of seagrass, bending and whispering in the breeze. Tiny shells lie half hidden in the sand, and shallow pools hold reflections of the sky. Each one a quiet little world of amber light and rippling blue. With each breath, the muscles of your face soften. Your jaw grows loose. Your eyes become heavy. The sounds of the cove begin to replace the sounds of the day, the gentle wash of water, the soft hush of wind, the distant murmur of things settling down. And as the breath becomes easy, as thoughts begin to slow, the story drifts away from the listener and settles on a small life in that cove, a life moving at the pace of waves and clouds and fading sun. In the sheltered water beyond the silvered sand, there lived a young otter with fur the color of river stones after rain. Her name was Luma, though the wind seemed to say it more softly than anyone else, carrying it through reeds and kelp, as if it were part of the tide's own lullaby. Luma was not the busiest otter in the cove. She did not hurry from rock to rock with the bright restlessness of her cousins, nor did she splash for the sake of splashing when the water was calm and deep. She liked to float on her back beneath open sky, paws folded over her chest, listening to the tiny sounds that other creatures missed. The click of a shell turning in the current, the low creak of kelp stems swaying beneath the surface. the secret fizz of bubbles rising from stones. Her cove was tucked between two green cliffs, so gently hidden that the larger world often forgot it was there. The cliffs curved around the beach like protective arms, their faces softened by moss and flowering vines. Above them, wind-shaped pines leaned toward the water, their branches moving slowly against the changing sky. In spring, pale blossoms fell from the cliff path and drifted down into the pools. In summer, bees moved sleepily through the coastal flowers, and in the long, golden evenings, the whole cove seemed to exhale as if it had been waiting all day to become quiet. On this evening, the sun had begun its slow descent. It lowered itself toward the far horizon with such tenderness that even the waves seemed careful not to disturb it. The water caught every color and kept it for a while, bright at first, then mellow, then soft as memory. Pink and apricot shimmered in the ripples. Shadows gathered beneath the rocks. The sea grass glowed at the edges, and Luma, curled upon a flat stone near the tide line, opened one eye and watched the world become gentle. She'd spent the afternoon gathering clams in the shallows, rolling in the cool waves, and grooming her thick fur until it puffed like a small, drowsy cloud. Now she was sleepy in the way otters are sleepy after a good day. When the belly is full, the whiskers are clean, and the paws are pleasantly tired from work and play. She yawned so widely that her tiny teeth flashed in the sunset, then settled her chin on her paws. Near her stone, a little inlet curled inward from the sea, lined with kelp and smooth pebbles. It was Luma's favorite place in all the cove. The water there moved more slowly, protected from the larger waves, and at sunset it became a bowl of glowing light. Sometimes, when the tide was high enough, Luma floated there and watched the sky change overhead. She would let herself drift without paddling, carried only by the gentle pulse of the sea, while the first stars appeared one by one above the cliffs. This evening, she slid from her rock with barely a sound. The water received her like cool silk. She turned onto her back and floated, her round ears just above the surface, her whiskers silvered with drops. Around her, long ribbons of kelp swayed beneath the water, dark green and golden where they caught the light. Tiny fish flickered among them, moving together, as if they shared one dreaming mind. Luma let the tide carry her toward the inlet. The cove was full of small evening preparations. A crab tucked itself beneath a stone and pulled a curtain of sand over its doorway. A pair of sandpipers made their final delicate steps along the wet shore, leaving lace-like tracks that the next wave softly erased. High in the cliff pines, a thrush sang a few low notes, then paused as though listening for the answer in the sea. Everything was going home, or going inward, or becoming still. Luma knew the rhythm. The cove had taught it to her without words. Morning was for searching and diving. Noon was for sunning and play. Afternoon was for grooming and finding the warmest stone. But sunset was different. Sunset was when the whole shore turned toward rest. It was when the day loosened its bright threads and wove them into dreams. She floated through the inlet and brushed past a cluster of bobbing kelp bulbs. One bumped gently against her side, and she nudged it with a paw. The kelp moved away and returned, bumping once more, as if asking a sleepy question. Luma blinked at it, too calm to answer, and let herself drift on. At the far end of the inlet was a small cave, not deep and not dark, but shadowed enough to feel secret. Its mouth opened just above the water, framed by hanging moss and a few trailing roots from the cliff above. When the tide rose, a shallow pool formed inside, and the ceiling reflected the movement of the water in wavering bands of light. Luma often rested there when the evening breeze grew cool, for the stone held the day's warmth, and the sound of the tide became soft and round within the cave walls. But before going in, she paused, because the sunset had reached its loveliest moment. The horizon glowed like a lantern behind a veil. The sun, now half hidden by the sea, seemed to melt into the water without hurry. Clouds floated above it, long and feathered, their undersides painted rose and gold. The reflections trembled over the surface of the cove, breaking and joining again with each ripple, so that the whole world appeared to be breathing light. Luma turned slowly in the water, her paws resting over her chest. Her eyes grew heavy, then opened again. She did not want to miss the colors. She never did, though she had seen many sunsets. Each one felt like a small gift left on the water, just for those who were quiet enough to notice. On the shore, an old heron stood in the shallows. He was tall and gray-blue, with thin legs and a patient gaze. Luma knew him as Orin. He came to the cove most evenings and stood like a thoughtful piece of driftwood watching the tide pools. Orin did not speak often, but when he did, his voice was slow and soft, like pebbles shifting underwater. "Evening, little drifter," he said without turning his head. Luma answered with a sleepy chirrup. "The sky is making a blanket tonight," Orin murmured. "A fine one." Luma looked up at the bands of color stretched above the cove. It did look like a blanket, wide and warm, being drawn over the sea. Orin lifted one foot and placed it carefully in the shallows. "I saw moon jellies beyond the outer rocks," he said. "They are rising early." At this, Luma became a little more awake, though not sharply awake, more like a candle flame lifting in a quiet room. Moon jellies sometimes drifted into the cove when the water was calm, round and pale and nearly transparent, glowing softly in the dusk. Luma loved to watch them from a careful distance. They moved without hurry, pulsing through the water like floating thoughts. She rolled over and paddled toward the mouth of the inlet, pausing where the water opened into the wider cove. There, beyond the dark shapes of the outer rocks, the sea lay smooth and dusky. At first she saw only ripples, then small glimmers, then pale circles rising and falling beneath the surface. The moon jellies were coming in with the tide. They entered slowly, scattered like fallen pieces of the moon before the moon itself had risen. Their soft bodies glowed with the faintest blue-white light. They drifted between the kelp strands, beneath the shadows of gulls, over the sandbars where the water deepened. Luma watched, transfixed and drowsy, as the cove filled with quiet lanterns. Orin stood still among them, his reflection wavering. "Peaceful tide," he said. Luma made a contented sound and floated backward, giving the jellies room. She did not need to touch them. It was enough to see their gentle pulsing, enough to feel the water change around their presence. They made the cove seem even more dreamlike, as though sunset had sunk below the surface and continued glowing there. The first star appeared above the left cliff, small and clear. Then another appeared near it. The sky's bright colors began to deepen into mauve and blue. The air cooled. The scents of salt, kelp, wet stone, and distant pine settled together. Somewhere in the grass, crickets began their thin, soft music, one voice at a time until the sound became a delicate weaving. Luma drifted near a raft of kelp and wrapped herself loosely in a strand so the tide would not carry her too far. Otters in her cove often did this when resting. It was a simple thing, a small, trusting loop between body and sea. The kelp held her gently, not tightly, and she floated with the slow sway of it. Her eyes followed a moon jelly as it rose, paused and sank again. Rise, pause, sink, rise, pause, sink. The rhythm matched the waves, it matched the crickets, it matched the breath of the cove. From the cliff path came a faint rustling. A family of rabbits emerged from the coastal grass and settled near the warm stones to nibble at the tender plants that grew there. They were quiet at first, then quieter still, their ears glowing pink in the last light. Luma watched them without moving. The rabbits knew her. Everyone in the cove knew Luma, not because she was loud or grand, but because she was gentle. And gentleness has a way of being remembered. One of the smallest rabbits hopped close to the water's edge and stared at the moon jellies with round, astonished eyes. Luma blinked slowly at him. The little rabbit blinked back, then tucked himself beside his mother. Soon his head drooped. Soon his nose stopped twitching quite so quickly. Soon he was asleep. Luma felt sleep tug at her too, but not fully yet. There was a path she liked to follow before curling into the cave for the night. Not a path on land, but a path in the water, known by currents and stones and the old familiar shapes beneath the surface. It led from the kelp raft, around the tide pools, past the shell bank and into the cave. She followed it most evenings, and in following it she seemed to tell her body that the day was complete. So she slipped free of the kelp and began to paddle gently along the inner rim of the cove. The water was neither cold nor warm now, but balanced between the two like the air just before sleep. It moved around her fur with soft pressure. She passed over stones worn smooth by years of tide. Small anemones closed their petals as shadows deepened, Barnacles clung to the rocks like tiny white houses with doors shut for the night. A sea star rested among them, unmoving, as patient as the evening itself. Luma turned toward the shell bank. It was a crescent of pale sand where the tide left its brightest treasures: mussel shells, clam shells, spiral shells, fragments of mother of pearl, and bits of sea glass smoothed to cloudy green and blue. At sunset, the shell bank glimmered faintly, not brightly enough to startle the eye, but enough to make the shore look dusted with sleeping stars. She climbed onto the sand and shook herself once, sending droplets in a soft circle around her. Then she padded slowly along the bank, placing one webbed paw after another. The sand was cool on top and warmer underneath, where the day's heat still lingered. She lowered her nose and sniffed at a piece of driftwood, a ribbon of kelp, an empty clam shell with a pearly inside. In the middle of the shell bank lay something she had not seen before. It was a stone small enough to fit between her paws, rounded by the sea and pale as moonlight. But it was not quite white. It held a faint color within it, a kind of sleepy silver blue that seemed to shift when she tilted her head. Luma touched it with one paw. It was smooth and cool. There was nothing alarming about it. No sudden magic, no sharp mystery, only a quiet feeling like finding a wordless blessing left by the tide. She picked it up and rolled onto her back in the shallows, holding the little stone against her chest. Otters often carried favorite stones, and Luma had a few hidden in the cave, each one chosen for its shape or shine, or the way it fit beneath her paw. This one felt different only because it belonged so perfectly to the evening. It seemed to have gathered the sunset and the moon jellies and the first stars into its smoothness. Luma decided to bring it home. She floated toward the cave with the stone held carefully in both paws. The last rim of the sun had vanished now, leaving behind a glow that softened the whole horizon. The moon had not risen yet, but the sky held a promise of it. The cove was blue and silver, with lavender shadows under the cliffs and the moon jellies drifting like dreams through the darker water. As she neared the cave, Orin the heron lifted his wings. They opened wide and slow, catching the dim light along their edges. "Rest well, little drifter," he said. Luma chirruped around the stone, which made the sound small and muffled. Orin stepped into the air and flew low across the cove, his wings moving with such measured grace that he seemed to be part of the dusk itself. He vanished beyond the reeds where the creek entered the sea. Luma watched him go, then entered the cave. Inside, the world became hushed. The cave was shallow and smooth, with a curved ceiling that glimmered faintly from the water below. The tide filled its floor with a pool just deep enough for floating. Along one dry ledge, Luma had made a nest of seagrass, soft kelp, and the finest pieces of driftweed, all arranged in a hollow that fit her body. Beside it, in a small crevice, she kept her stones. There was the dark speckled one that looked like a seal's nose. There was the reddish one, warm and flat, good for cracking shells. There was the tiny green stone she'd found after a storm, polished smooth as a leaf. Luma placed the new pale stone among them. It rested there quietly, catching what little light remained and giving it back as a soft gleam. She climbed onto the ledge and began grooming herself. Slowly, carefully, she combed her fur with her paws, fluffing it so it would hold warmth through the night. This was another evening rhythm, as familiar as the tide path. Stroke, pause, breathe. Stroke, pause, breathe. Outside the cave, the waves whispered. Inside, droplets fell from a root tip into the pool with tiny, rounded sounds. At the cave mouth, the moon jellies drifted past. Their glow moved across the stone walls, faint and slow, appearing and disappearing like thoughts too gentle to keep. Luma's paws grew heavier. Her head dipped once, then lifted. She groomed a little more, but the movements became dreamier, less certain, until finally she rested her paws on her belly and simply breathed. The cove beyond the cave continued its evening settling. The rabbits slept in the grass above the tide line. The crabs remained tucked beneath their stones. The anemones were closed in their soft underwater sleep. The sandpipers had flown to their quiet roosts among the reeds. Even the kelp seemed slower now, swaying not as if moved by water, but as if dreaming of water. A breeze entered the cave, carrying the scent of pine and salt. It touched Luma's whiskers, then moved on. She opened her eyes halfway and saw the pale stone in the crevice. Its small glow was not bright, not magical in a showy way, but it comforted her. It looked like a tiny piece of the sky had come indoors to keep her company. Outside, the moon lifted at last. It rose from behind the right cliff, round and silver, softened by a thin veil of mist. The cove changed under it. The water became darker, yet more luminous. The rocks gained silver edges. The shellbank shimmered faintly. Every ripple held a thread of light. Luma did not get up to see it fully. She knew the moon's arrival by the way the cave brightened, by the way the pool beneath her ledge began to gleam, by the way the shadows softened instead of deepened. She knew it by the feeling that came over the cove, a feeling of being watched over by something calm and old. A night moth fluttered near the cave mouth, turned twice in the moonlight, and drifted away. Somewhere above, an owl called from the pines, not loudly, not near enough to disturb, but low and rounded, a sound that seemed to belong to the darkening blue. The call faded. The waves answered with a hush. Luma curled more tightly in her nest, her tail curved along her side, her paws tucked close. Her head rested near the smooth rim of the ledge, where she could still hear the pool below. The little pale stone remained within sight, though her eyelids were heavy now and the glow of it blurred. As she drifted towards sleep, she dreamed before she was fully dreaming. She imagined the cove beneath the water, quiet and blue, with moon jellies moving like lanterns through a garden of kelp. She imagined the shell bank shining softly under the tide, She imagined herself floating without needing to paddle, held by the sea as the sea was held by the moon. There was no hurry in these thoughts, no sharp edge. They came and went like waves that knew exactly where to turn. In the dream, she was smaller, perhaps as small as she had been when she first learned the Cove's paths. She followed her mother through the water at dusk, copying the graceful roll and dive, the way to hold a shell, the way to listen for currents. Her mother's fur was warm and dark. Her voice was a soft, churring sound that meant safety. The young Luma floated beside her, gazing up at a sky full of colors she did not yet have names for. Then the dream changed, as dreams do, without effort. She was floating among stars, not above the cove and not beneath it, but somewhere that felt like both. The moon jellies had become constellations, gently pulsing in the dark. The kelp had become long ribbons of green light. The pale stone from the shell bank rested on her chest, light as a breath, and with each rise and fall of it, the stars brightened and dimmed. Nothing called her away. Nothing asked her to do more than float. The tide breathed. The cove slept. And deeper in the cave, Luma slept too. The night became very quiet, but not empty. It was full of soft keeping. The sea kept the shore, the cliffs kept the cove. The kelp kept the sleeping otter from drifting in her dreams. The moon kept its silver path across the water. And all the small lives hidden in grass, sand, pool, and stone rested within the same wide hush. Hours passed without needing to be counted. The moon climbed higher, then drifted westward. The stars brightened in the dark spaces between faint clouds. The tide turned with no announcement, as it always did, and began its slow journey outward. Water slipped from the cave pool by tiny degrees. It left shining lines on the stone. It carried a few moon jellies back toward the open sea, while others remained in the cove, pulsing gently in the deeper water. Luma slept through it all. Once she twitched a paw as if touching a dream shell. Once her whiskers trembled. Once she gave the smallest sigh and tucked her nose more deeply into her fur. But she did not wake. She was safe in the curve of the cave, warm in her nest, surrounded by the familiar sounds that had known her since she was young. Near dawn, a mist gathered low over the water. It blurred the rocks and softened the cliff pines until they looked painted in pale gray. The cove seemed to float between night and morning, not yet ready to become either one. But Luma remained in the deep part of sleep, where even the coming dawn was only a quiet brightness behind closed eyes. And now the story too begins to soften. The waves grow slower. The moonlight thins. The cave is warm and still. Luma sleeps with her paws tucked close, her breath gentle, her dreams full of silver water and drifting stars. The little pale stone rests among the others, quiet in the crevice, holding the memory of sunset until another evening comes. The cove asks nothing. The sea asks nothing. The night holds everything that needs to be held, and you may let yourself be held as well, resting as deeply as the sleepy otter in her hidden cave. Let the breath come and go. Let each thought float away on the tide. Let the body become heavy, safe, and calm. Far beyond the edge of waking, the cove remains. Soft water, cool sand, a silver moon, a little otter sleeping. Good night, dear traveler. Sleep well.